those naps. You also are disrupting the total architecture of sleep in the early morning hours. There's a lot of great science that's been put to this, or that's emerged from this, I should say. So try and keep those sleep-wake times relatively constant, plus or minus an hour, and try as much as you can to delay that caffeine intake 90 to 120 minutes after waking every day, but especially on days where you wake up and you feel you haven't gotten enough sleep. In that case, I highly recommend you just use NSDR or the Reverie app or some other form of deep relaxation to try and compensate for the lack of sleep. Knowing, of course, that there's no complete compensation for lack of sleep. There are just things that we can do to partially offset lack of sleep. Now, a couple of final points and additional tools that I think are going to be useful to everybody, in particular people who have young children or are following a shift work schedule or who are experiencing jet lag. Keep in mind, jet lag can be due to travel, which is obvious, but jet lag can also be due to getting woken up in the middle of the night, right? Your body doesn't know the difference between flying to a new time zone and getting woken up in the middle of the night. The tool that I'd like to offer you is an understanding of something called temperature minimum. And I'm going to make this as simple as possible, and I'm confident that everyone can understand this, even if you don't have any science background. Here's the question you need to ask yourself. What is your typical wake-up time? Okay, what's your typical wake-up time? If for you, your typical wake-up time is 7 a.m. plus or minus half an hour, and that could be 7 a.m. because you set an alarm clock, or it could be 7 a.m. because you naturally wake up at 7 a.m. Doesn't matter. If your typical wake-up time most days is 7 a.m., well, then your temperature minimum is 5 a.m. That's right. Your temperature minimum is not a temperature. It's a time within your 24-hour cycle. Approximately 2 hours before your typical wake-up time, your body is at its lowest temperature that it will ever be in the 24-hour cycle. That's why it's called your temperature minimum. Here's what you need to know about your temperature minimum. If you view bright light, exercise, or drink caffeine, or all of the above in the 2 to 4 hours before your temperature minimum, that will delay your clock. What that means when I say delay your clock is it will make you want to go to sleep later and wake up later the next night. Okay, so let's run this exercise for you, the person waking up at 7 a.m. on a regular basis. I can predict with almost certainty that your body is going to be at its lowest temperature at 5 a.m. So what that means is that if you get up at 3 a.m. or at 4 a.m. and you flip on bright lights in your house or in your bathroom, or you have a cup of coffee, or you do any kind of exercise, or you get up and head to the airport, the mechanisms in your brain and body that control timing of sleep and timing of waking will shift. They will delay. It's as if you put your clock on hold for a little while and then let it start again. Okay, that's the simplest way I can describe it. And you will tend to want to go to sleep later and wake up later the following night. Now, the opposite is true if you view bright light, drink caffeine, or exercise, or socialize, I should say, in the hours immediately after your temperature minimum. So for you, in this example, the person who's waking up at 7 a.m., your temperature minimum is 5 a.m. If you view bright light, exercise, maybe have a snack, maybe not, or socialize, move about at 5:30 or 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., that will tend to phase advance your clock. It will tend to basically make you want to go to bed earlier and wake up earlier the following night. Now, I use this example of a person who wakes up typically at 7 a.m., whose temperature minimum is 5 a.m., but of course you need to adjust that for yourself if you're somebody who wakes up at 9 a.m. or at 5 a.m., etc. Why do I offer this as a tool? Well, this is an immensely powerful tool if, for instance, you're headed to a time zone where you need to go to bed earlier and wake up earlier once you arrive in that time zone. What it means is in the day or two before you leave, you can force yourself to exercise, drink caffeine, maybe even to eat a meal early in the morning, or maybe you still fast early in the morning, and that's really up to you. But you force yourself to do the activities that are going to phase advance your clock. Whereas if you're traveling to a time zone where you are going to need to go to sleep much later and you're going to need to wake up much later or even a little bit later, you can do those things in the hours prior to your temperature minimum. Now, for those of you that work shift work, this can be especially useful, but I want to say a couple of things about shift work. There are a lot of details about shift work and jet lag in an episode that I did specifically about jet lag and shift work. So for the deep dive, go there. But suffice to say this for now. If you are going to do shift work, try to stay on the same shift for 2 weeks at a time. It's very detrimental to brain and body. It can even be horrifically challenging for your brain and body in a number of ways if you are switching on the so-called swing shift. You're working 3 days the night shift, 3 days the day shift, 3 days the night shift, 3 days. Try and stay on the same schedule as much as possible. And I should say for everybody, people who are jet lagged and engaged in shift work or not, but just for everybody, if you need to be awake in the middle of your sleep cycle, and it's not just a quick departure to the bathroom and back to bed, but you really need to be awake. You're feeding a baby, or you're taking care of a loved one, or you need to do something that's critical, or you need to work. If possible, use red light. Okay. Now, for shift workers who really are trying to stay awake all night and sleep all day, this is not going to be ideal. But for people that, for instance, need to stay up really late one night or wake up especially early, like 3 a.m. to prepare for an exam that you're just not ready for, or to head to the airport, etc., using red light has been shown to allow people to be awake enough that, and obviously see what they need to see in order to perform their activity safely, but it does not seem to disrupt the cortisol rhythm that is the healthy, normal cortisol rhythm. Now, I realize this is kind of an advanced tool, and many people won't have access to this. There are a number of different sources for red lights now. Companies like Juve or Cozy Light. These are different brands. I don't have any affiliation to any of these brands, I should say. There are a number of different red light bulb sources out there and commercial sources that you can explore if you want. But understanding this temperature minimum is really powerful because it allows you to adjust your schedule depending on travel, depending on changing work schedules or school schedules. And if you're not a morning person, you can use the tools related to temperature minimum to really become a morning person over time. And it actually is pretty easy. And I talked about this in a previous episode, but I'll just mention that there have been shown to be important positive effects on cognition, on even grip strength and physical performance for people that are early morning risers. And that's especially true for night owls that deliberately shift themselves to become early risers. Okay, so that's a lot of information and a lot of tools. And I suppose the one set of tools that I really didn't drill into too deeply, the ones related to jet lag and shift work. And again, please check out the episode on jet lag and shift work if that's relevant to you.